The desert sun hung low, casting long shadows over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, where dust devils swirled like forgotten ghosts. Ethan Hawk Harlan throttled his Harley, the engine's rumble a steady heartbeat against the vast emptiness. He'd been riding alone for hours, the wind whipping at his leather vest, scarred from years of bar fights and battlefield memories. At 42, Hawk carried the weight of a promise made in the smoke of a distant war: protect the innocent, no matter the cost. But lately, that oath felt like a chain, dragging him through empty miles after losing his brother to a senseless raid gone wrong. The road ahead blurred into the horizon until a small figure caught his eye at the roadside. A girl, no older than 8, her sundress torn and dirt-streaked, waving frantically with a stick of chalk clutched in her tiny fist. She'd scrawled it right there on the dusty tank of his bike while he paused for water at a rundown gas station earlier that afternoon. 3 words that pierced like shrapnel: "Help me." Hawk hadn't noticed until now, pulling over abruptly as the child's cries cut through the engine's growl. "Lily," she called herself later, her voice a fragile whisper amid sobs. She stood trembling by a weathered fence, eyes wide with the terror of secrets too heavy for her shoulders. The house behind her loomed like a sentinel of neglect. A sagging porch, windows boarded with splintered plywood, the faint scent of mildew and despair wafting on the breeze. No one else around, just the endless scrubland and the distant howl of coyotes. Hawk's gut twisted. He'd seen that look before, in the faces of kids caught in crossfires he couldn't stop. He killed the engine, boots crunching gravel as he approached, his shadow falling over her like a shield. "Hey, kid," he said softly, kneeling to her level, the metallic tang of his rings glinting in the fading light. "What's got you out here alone? That message on my bike, it's yours?" Lily nodded, tears carving clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She pointed to the house, words tumbling out in a rush. Her father gone for days, strange men coming at night, whispers of debts and threats that made her hide under her bed. The air grew thick, charged with the unspoken horror of a home-turned prison. Hawk's hand instinctively went to the old dog tags under his shirt, a reminder of brothers lost to broken systems. He glanced at the house, the door ajar like an invitation to chaos. Against every instinct screaming to ride on, he stood, resolve hardening like cooling steel. "Stay here," he murmured, but she grabbed his sleeve, her grip fierce. This wasn't just a stop. It was a spark to an old fire. Pushing the door open, the hinges creaked like a warning. Inside, the dim interior assaulted his senses, stale air heavy with the ghosts of spilled whiskey and unwashed fear. Shadows danced from a single bulb swinging overhead, illuminating a chaos of overturned furniture and shattered glass that hinted at recent struggle. No bodies, no overt signs of harm. But the disarray screamed violation. A child's drawing crumpled on the floor, a half-eaten meal congealing on the table. Hawk moved like a predator, senses sharp, the creak of floorboards under his weight, the faint drip of a leaky faucet echoing isolation. In the back room, he found her. Lily's mother slumped in a chair, bruised shadows under her eyes, murmuring incoherently about loans from shadowy figures in town. She wasn't alone. Faint voices drifted from outside, tires crunching on the drive, creditors, or worse, the kind who enforced with fists instead of words. Hawk's phone was already in hand, thumb hovering over contacts buried deep in his past. The Iron Oath MC, his crew, scattered but bound by blood and vows from foxholes and midnight rides. They'd parted ways after the war, chasing personal demons, but a promise was a promise. "Ryder," he growled into the line as the first call connected, voice low and urgent. "You remember that oath? Got a situation, kid in trouble, signs of aggression in a nowhere town? Need the full muster by dawn." The response crackled back, a brother's gravelly affirmation. "On my way, Hawk. Rally the ghosts." One by one, the calls went out. Old war buddies turned mechanics, firefighters nursing their own scars, a nurse who'd patched them up in forgotten clinics. 34 riders, from dusty garages to quiet suburbs, stirring to life at his word. Engines would roar soon, headlights piercing the night like stars falling into formation. As dusk bled into twilight, Hawk stepped back outside, Lily clinging to his leg. The mother followed, shaky but alive, the weight of her story unfolding in halting breaths. Debts from a bad turn, men who preyed on the vulnerable turning a family into collateral. Hawk's jaw set, the biker code igniting. No one touched the innocent on his watch. He could feel the pull, that ancient loyalty knitting them back together, a family forged not by blood, but by the fire of shared honor. The first distant rumble echoed. Joshua, his vice from the old days, cresting the hill on a customized chopper, followed by more shadows emerging from the dark. Lily's eyes widened, not in fear, but wonder, as the convoy began to assemble, leather and chrome gleaming under the emerging moon. By midnight, the yard filled with the low thunder of idling bikes, riders dismounting with nods of silent understanding. Hawk briefed them in the glow of taillights, the air humming with purpose. No guns drawn, no rash moves, just the quiet power of men who'd stared down worse. They fanned out, securing the perimeter, while Hawk coordinated with a local contact, a veteran sheriff who'd bent rules for the right cause. The girl's plea on his tank wasn't just chalk, it was a beacon, drawing the pack from their solitary paths. As the stars wheeled overhead, Hawk knelt again by Lily, her small hand in his calloused one. "You're safe now," he promised, the words sealing a new chapter in his redemption. The road ahead twisted with moral reckonings, corrupt lenders to confront, justice to carve from the shadows. But for the first time in years, Hawk didn't ride alone. The iron oath was whole again, bound by a child's cry and a biker's unyielding word. The night deepened, engines purring like guardians, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, promising a ride that would echo through their lives forever. The first rays of dawn sliced through the scrubland haze, painting the assembled bikes in hues of molten gold. Ethan Hawk Harlan stood at the edge of the yard, his silhouette etched against the rising light as the full muster of the Iron Oath rolled in like a steel tide. 34 riders, ghosts from his past, converging on this forgotten speck of a town off Route 17. Joshua Ryder Kane pulled up first, his chopper's exhaust coughing a plume of dust, followed by Samuel Forge Bennett on a vintage Indian that growled like a waking beast. They dismounted in unison, boots hitting gravel with the rhythm of old drills. Leather vests creaking under the weight of patches faded from sandstorms and sweat-soaked nights. Hawk nodded to them, his voice a low rumble amid the idling engines. "Brothers, this ain't just a ride, it's the oath. Girls got a home turned hell by shadows in suits, debts twisted into chains." Lily huddled close to her mother Emma on the sagging porch steps. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched a threadbare shawl, her eyes darting to the horizon where the threat loomed. She'd whispered more in the night hours. The lenders from the edge of town, men with polished cars and iron grips, who'd started with warnings and escalated to nights of pounding fists on the door. No badges, no mercy, just the cold arithmetic of profit over lives. The air carried the sharp bite of dew-kissed sagebrush, mingling with the oily tang of hot metal, as the riders formed a loose circle, faces etched with the quiet fury of men who'd buried too many under similar skies. Forge, a burly ex-marine with a scar snaking across his jaw from a shrapnel kiss in forgotten dunes, knelt by Lily. His voice softened, a gravelly contrast to his frame. "Hey, little warrior, you did right marking that tank. Hawk here's the best tracker we got." Lily managed a small smile, her chalk-dusted fingers twisting the hem of her dress. The group swelled. Andrew Ghost Riley, a lanky firefighter from the suburbs, his turnout jacket slung over his handlebars. Nathan "Doc" Ellis, the nurse who'd stitched their wounds in back-alley clinics, arriving with a medical kit strapped to his side. They came from garages reeking of grease, quiet homes haunted by echoes of loss, all drawn by the single call that pierced their solitary routines. No questions asked. The promise from their war days held them tighter than any contract. As the sun crested, casting long shadows that danced like spectres across the yard, Hawk led a briefing under the porch light that flickered like a dying star. These bastards run the local mill, squeeze folks dry on protection fees. Emma's husband vanished owing them, poof, gone into the wind. We don't storm, we stand. Show 'em the wall they can't break. The riders murmured assent, the bond palpable in the shared glances, the subtle clasps of shoulders. It was the family they'd forged in foxholes and on rain-slicked highways, not born of blood, but tempered in fire. Joshua scanned the group, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. Fitting, given the name. Perimeter watch. Doc, check on the mum. Rest of us, eyes open for incoming. The morning unfolded in tense whispers, the convoy a living barrier around the house. Tires crunched in the distance first, a sleek black sedan, dust trailing like a predator's wake. Two men emerged, crisp shirts hiding the bulk of enforcers beneath, clipboards in hand like weapons of bureaucracy. The lead, a slick-haired type named Harlan, irony biting like salt in a wound, stepped forward, his smile thin as razor wire. "Morning, folks. This here's private property. Ma'am." He nodded to Emma. "Time's up on that loan. We need to talk terms." His partner lingered by the car, hand twitching near a concealed bulge, the air thickening with unspoken menace. Hawk stepped into the light, his presence a monolith, the dog tags glinting against his chest. "Terms, like the ones that leave families broken, we're talking now." The man's eyes narrowed, flicking over the sea of leather and chrome, calculating odds. Behind Hawk, the riders shifted subtly, Joshua cracking his knuckles, Forge's massive frame blocking the porch like a fortress wall. No drawn weapons, just the unyielding wall of honor, the quiet thunder of loyalty that needed no shout. Harlan sneered, voice oily. "You bikers think you scare us? This town's got laws." But his gaze wavered, the facade cracking under the weight of 34 stairs, each carrying stories of battles won without a single bullet. Emma rose shakily, Doc at her side, his steady hand on her arm. "They took my husband, said he'd work it off, but he never came back. Please, just leave us be." Her words hung in the air, fragile as morning mist, stirring something in the enforcers, or perhaps it was the low growl of engines revving in unison, a symphony of restrained power. The slick one hesitated, sweat beading on his brow despite the cooling air. Hawk leaned in, voice even, laced with the steel of conviction. "Ride out clean, or we make sure every debt collector from here to the border hears how you prey on the weak. Oaths clear. You'd protect the line." It wasn't a threat. It was a vow, echoing the promises that had pulled them from their paths. The standoff stretched, seconds ticking like a fuse in the silence, broken only by the whisper of wind through the scrub. Harlan's partner muttered something, eyes darting to the growing assembly, more bikes cresting the hill, late arrivals swelling their ranks. Finally, the lead man backed toward the sedan, clipboard clutched like a shield. "This ain't over." But as they peeled away, tires spitting gravel, a ripple of grim satisfaction passed through the riders. Lily watched from the porch, her small face alight with tentative hope, the chalk message on Hawk's tank, now a talisman wiped clean, but etched in memory. Yet Dawn's promise carried shadows. As the group dispersed to fortify, Hawk caught Joshua's eye, the vice's expression grave. Whispers from town contacts hinted at deeper rot, a sheriff in pocket, mills hiding more than debts, perhaps even the father's trail leading to unmarked graves in the desert. The moral coil tightened. Justice here demanded more than presence. It called for unraveling the web without becoming the monster. Hawk felt the old scars pull, reminders of losses that had fractured the club before. But with brothers at his back, the fire reignited, a beacon against corruption's chill. By mid-morning, the yard hummed with purpose. Andrew rigging a perimeter fence from spare chain link, Nathan tending to Emma's fading bruises with gentle efficiency. Lily darted among them, a spark of life amid the grit, offering shy thanks that warmed colder hearts. Hawk stood watch, the sun climbing high, baking the earth into a forge. The ride had just begun, twisting toward reckonings that would test every bond, every whispered promise from wars past. In this nowhere place, under a sky vast as forgotten oaths, the iron oath stood unbroken, guardians forged in the dust of a child's desperate plea. The horizon beckoned, not with escape, but with the quiet roar of redemption unfolding. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, turning the yard into a shimmering oven where heat waves distorted the air like mirages of doubt. Ethan, Hawk, Harlan wiped sweat from his brow, the salt stinging the faint scar above his eye, a souvenir from a night raid that had cost him more than flesh. The Iron Oath riders had settled into a vigilant rhythm, their bikes forming a ragged semicircle around the house like iron sentinels against the encroaching wilds. Joshua Ryder Kane leaned against his chopper, sharpening a multi-tool with deliberate strokes. The metallic scrape a counterpoint to the distant buzz of cicadas. "That sedan'll be back with friends," he muttered, eyes scanning the horizon where dust clouds hinted at approaching trouble. Hawk nodded, the weight of command settling heavier than his vest, pulling at threads of old regrets, promises broken in the haze of war, brothers left behind in the sand. Inside the dim kitchen, Nathan Doc Ellis worked with quiet precision, his medical kit splayed across the scarred wooden table. Emma sat across from him, sleeves rolled up to reveal faded marks on her arms, echoes of grip too tight and tempers too short. "It's not just bruises," she said, voice barely above the hum of the ancient fridge. "They come at night, demanding payments my husband never owed. Said he'd sign over the land if he couldn't pay, our little plot here, all we had left after the mill closed." Doc's hands paused, his face a mask of practiced calm, but his eyes, sharp from years stitching wounds in flickering ambulance lights, betrayed the storm within. He'd lost a sister to similar shadows once, debts swallowing a family whole. "We'll get answers," he assured her, wrapping a fresh bandage with the gentleness of a man who'd bandaged souls as much as skin. Lily hovered in the doorway, clutching a faded stuffed bear, her gaze flicking between her mother and the strangers who'd become shields. Outside, Samuel Forge Bennett and Andrew Ghost Riley reinforced the perimeter, hammering stakes into the dry soil with the rhythm of blacksmiths at an anvil. Forge's massive arms flexed under his tattooed sleeves, ink depicting eagles in flight that seemed to stir with each swing. "Remember that dust up in the valleys?" he grunted to Ghost, who nodded, his lanky frame wiry from hauling hoses in infernos that left scars deeper than burns. "Yeah, but this ain't bullets. It's the slow bleed. These suits hide behind papers, but it's the same rot." Their laughter was brief, a spark in the tension, binding them closer as Lily wandered out, drawn by the activity. She tugged at Forge's pant leg, offering a drawing she'd scribbled on scrap paper, a crude motorcycle with a smiling rider. "For you," she whispered, and the big man knelt, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "That's my new lucky charm, kid. Keeps the monsters away." In her eyes, Hawk saw the flicker of trust blooming, a fragile flower in barren ground, reminding him why the oath mattered, not for glory, but for these quiet victories over despair. As noon crested, a low rumble shattered the stasis. Not bikes, but a battered pickup cresting the rise, kicking up gravel like accusations. It skidded to a halt at the fence line, an older man spilling out, grey-streaked beard, flannel shirt stained with engine oil, eyes hollowed by worry. He clutched a crumpled envelope, hands shaking as he approached the line of riders. Hawk stepped forward, hand raised in a gesture more peace than warning. "Easy, friend. State your business." The man, calling himself Thomas, a neighbor from the next scrub patch over, glanced nervously at the house. "Heard the engines last night. Emma, she all right? Those mill dogs been circling her place for weeks. Her man, Caleb, he worked the lines with me, vanished after signing some fool paper. I saw him drag him off, muttering about collateral in the back of a van, headed toward the old quarry east of town." His words hung heavy, laced with the scent of fear, sweat, and cheap tobacco, painting pictures of unmarked trails where debts dissolved into silence. The revelation rippled through the group like a stone in still water. Joshua's jaw tightened, his mind already mapping routes etched from cross-country halls. Quarry's a ghost spot, abandoned since the crash. Perfect for hiding dirt. Hawk felt the moral snare tighten. This wasn't mere protection anymore, but a delve into the abyss where justice blurred with vengeance. He'd sworn off the deep end after the war, the ghosts of unnecessary blood too loud in quiet nights. Yet Lily's chalked plea echoed in his mind, a child's voice cutting through the din. "We ride smart," he declared, voice steady as the horizon. "Scout first, no charging blind. Forge Ghost, you're with me. Ryder, hold the fort." Duh. The riders moved with oiled efficiency, a brotherhood reborn in motion, engines coughing to life, the acrid bite of exhaust mingling with the dry earth. They rolled out in a tight formation, 3 bikes slicing through the heat-shimmered road, dust plumes trailing like war banners. The quarry loomed after 20 miles of baked asphalt, a yawning scar in the landscape ringed by rusted chain link and crumbling silos. Hawk killed his engine at the edge, the silence amplifying the faint clink of wind chimes made from scrap metal, eerie sentinels in the desolation. They dismounted, boots silent on the gravel, senses attuned to the whisper of wind through skeletal machinery. No overt signs of life. But the air carried a stale undercurrent, like forgotten sweat and desperation. Circling the perimeter, Ghost spotted it first. Fresh tire tracks veering into a shadowed overhang and scuff marks on the dirt suggesting a struggle. Boots dragged, not walked. "Recent," he murmured, kneeling to trace the prints, his firefighter's eye for debris spotting a discarded glove. Monogrammed with the mill's faded logo. Deeper in, under a sagging warehouse roof, they found the remnants, a makeshift office, papers scattered like fallen leaves, ledgers open to columns of names and sums that screamed extortion. No body, no clear violence, but the disarray whispered of coercion, a chair overturned, a bloodied rag tucked in a corner, hinting at resistance unmet. Hawk's stomach knotted, the scene too akin to battlefield aftermaths where the innocent paid the toll. "Caleb was here," Forge rumbled, pocketing a photo from the desk. Emma and Lily smiling with a man who matched Thomas's description, arms around them in better days. It was a thread pulling them toward the heart of the corruption. The mill's owner, a shadow puppet master named Victor Lang, whose loans ensnared the desperate, vanishing the unwilling into labor that broke more than backs. As they retreated, the sun dipping toward afternoon gold, a distant engine growl warned of company, patrol cars, perhaps, tipped by the slick enforcers from dawn. Hawk signaled retreat, the trio mounting up with the urgency of wolves scenting hounds. Back at the house, they debriefed in the lengthening shadows, the yard now a hive of preparation. Riders checking chains, Doc organizing supplies, Lily drawing maps on the porch with newfound crayons from Nathan's kit. Emma's face paled at the news, but steel entered her eyes, gratitude forging resolve. "If he's out there, we can't let them win." Hawk met her gaze, the oath's fire steadying his own doubts. This ride twisted deeper, pitting loyalty against the system's venom, but the chosen family around him, 34 strong, stood as proof that promises endured. Twilight crept in, painting the sky in bruised purples as the first stars pricked the dome overhead. Whispers of the quarry's secrets fueled the night watch, tension coiling like a spring. Hawk sat with Lily under the porch light, her head on his knee, the simple act a balm against the gathering storm. Redemption wasn't in grand clashes, but in these threads of honor weaving through the dark, protecting what mattered, one unyielding stand at a time. The horizon held more trials, but the iron oath's roar promised they faced them unbroken. The stars hung like scattered diamonds over the scrubland, their cold light filtering through the porch slats as Ethan Hawk Harlan shifted slightly, Lily's even breathing a soft rhythm against his leg. The yard had quieted, the iron oath riders settling into night watches around flickering camp lanterns that cast elongated shadows across the bikes. The air cooled, carrying the faint, earthy scent of creosote bushes awakening in the dark, mingling with the lingering oil from the day's rides. Joshua Ryder Kane paced the perimeter, his silhouette a vigilant outline against the fence, while Samuel Forge Bennett stoked a small fire pit, the crackle of flames punctuating the hush like whispered confessions. Emma watched from the doorway, her shawl wrapped tight, the quarry's grim discoveries etching new lines of determination into her face. Hawk's mind replayed the warehouse scene, the scattered ledgers, the photo of a happier family, Victor Lang's name scrawled like a curse on faded invoices. It gnawed at him, stirring echoes of his own fractured past, a war buddy's debt to unseen powers, paid in blood under desert moons much like this one. He'd ridden away from that guilt years ago, burying it under miles of blacktop, but Lily's trust pulled it to the surface, raw and insistent. "You think Daddy's okay?" she murmured sleepily, her small hand clutching his vest. Hawk hesitated, the weight of half-truths heavy on his tongue. "We're gonna find out, kid. That's the promise." His voice was a low anchor, steadying them both in the uncertainty as the first owl's call pierced the night, a lonely sentinel echoing their vigil. Across the fire, Andrew Ghost Riley shared a thermos of strong coffee with Nathan Doc Ellis, steam rising like ghosts from their cups. Ghost's lanky form hunched forward, his voice a murmur laced with the gravel of too many close calls. "Quarry's just the tip. Leng's got hooks in the sheriff's office. Whispers from my contacts say they turn a blind eye to disappearances for a cut of the profits." Doc nodded, his nurse's hands, steady from stitching arteries in chaos, clenching around the thermos. He'd seen the fallout in emergency rooms, families shattered by invisible chains, bruises hidden under excuses. "It's a system built on breaking folks. But we've broken worse. Remember the blockade in the passes. Stood our ground, no shots fired." Their exchange wove the night's tension with threads of shared history, the iron oath's bond a quiet fortress against the encroaching dark. As midnight approached, the rumble of an approaching engine shattered the fragile peace, a lone motorcycle cresting the hill, its headlights slicing the blackness like a blade. The riders tensed, hands drifting to handlebars, but Hawk rose slowly, signaling calm. It was Tyler Shade Monroe, a late arrival from the northern edges, his lean frame dismounting with the grace of a shadow. Patches on his vest marked him as one of the old guard, a mechanic who'd welded their frames back together after a brutal highway skirmish. "Heard the call on the wire," he said, voice rough from long hauls, handing Hawk a worn map tube. "Dug this up from a buddy at the mill archives. Lang's operation runs deeper than loans. Forced labor camps in the Badlands, folks like Caleb vanishing into rehab shifts that never end." The map unrolled under lantern light, revealing sketched routes to hidden outposts, dotted with warnings in faded ink, sites of past enforcements, echoes of lives swallowed by the dust. Emma joined them, her steps tentative but resolute, drawn by the murmur of voices. Caleb signed nothing willingly. They cornered him after the layoffs, promised work if he just borrowed against the house. Her words trembled, painting a portrait of desperation. A father, cornered by empty cupboards and mounting bills, choosing chains to feed his own. Hawke studied the map, the moral crossroads sharpening. Ride in as avengers, or unravel the web with precision, preserving the oath's integrity. No blood on our hands, he decided, folding the paper with care. We expose them, bring the light. Shade, you're on recon at dawn with Ghost. Ryder, rally the town. Quiet talks with folks like Thomas, build the voices against Lang. The plan took shape in nods and murmurs, the family's chosen loyalty igniting like embers to flame, each man carrying the weight, not as burden, but as honor. Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes as the group dispersed, the fire's glow reflecting in her wide gaze. She toddled to Emma, burying her face in her mother's skirt, but paused to look back at Hawke. "You won't leave us." It was a child's plea, simple yet piercing, echoing the deeper fears that bound them all. Hawke knelt, the cool night air brushing his skin like a reminder of fragile lines. "Not till it's right, that's how we roll." In that moment, under the vast starlit canopy, the scars of his past felt less like chains and more like maps, guiding him toward redemption, one steadfast promise at a time. The hours slipped toward pre-dawn, the yard a hive of subdued activity. Forge checking tire pressures with rhythmic thuds, Doc restocking his kit under the porch bulb's hum. Whispers of strategy floated on the breeze, laced with the scent of cooling metal and sage. But as the first grey light tinged the east, a new disturbance stirred, a pair of headlights flickering on the distant road, slow and deliberate, like eyes in the gloom. Joshua spotted it first, his voice a sharp alert. "Company, not ours." The riders mounted in fluid motion, engines whispering to life without roar, forming a living wall as the vehicle, a dusty SUV, halted at the gate. Out stepped a woman in a rumpled uniform, badge glinting faintly. Sheriff Lena Hart, her face weathered by years of compromises, eyes sharp but weary. She approached with hands visible, the air thickening with the unspoken dance of authority and defiance. "Heard about the gathering," she said, voice carrying the twang of local soil. "Lang's boys are stirring the pot, calling in favors. You bikers poking where you shouldn't." Hawke met her gaze, unflinching, the dog tags cool against his chest. "We're standing for what's right. Your town's bleeding under his thumb, debts turning to disappearances. Help us end it clean." Lena hesitated, glancing at the house where Lily peeked from the window, her small form a silent indictment. The sheriff's alliance hung in the balance, a moral pivot that could tip the scales toward justice or deeper shadows. She sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of bent oaths. "Lang's got the council wrapped, but I've seen enough. Families torn for his greed. Give me till noon. I'll pull what strings I can without tipping him." It was a fragile truce, born of shared weariness, as she retreated to her vehicle. Taillights fading into the mist, the riders exhaled collectively, the tension easing like a bowstring released, but Hawke knew the coil remained. Trust in uniforms was a gamble, tested by fire. As dawn broke fully, gilding the bikes in soft light, the group prepared for the next push. Scouts outbound, voices gathering in town. Lily waved from the porch, her drawing clutched like a flag, a beacon of innocence amid the fray. The moral path twisted onward, demanding sacrifices of silence and strategy, but the Iron Oath's unity held firm, a family reforged in the crucible of loyalty, racing toward a reckoning that promised not just rescue, but restoration. Under the climbing sun, the horizon shimmered with possibility, the quiet roar of engines heralding actions, whose echoes would linger long after the dust settled. If this story of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds is touching your heart, hit that like button. It helps these tales of honor reach more souls in need of light. The sun climbed higher, its relentless gaze turning the yard into a crucible of light and shadow, where every glint of chrome seemed to etch the iron oath's resolve deeper into the baked earth. Ethan, Hawk, Harlan stood at the fence line, watching the dust from Sheriff Lena Hart's SUV settle like a fading promise, his calloused fingers tracing the edge of the map tube Tyler Shade Monroe had brought. The air hummed with the low murmur of engines cooling, mingled with the sharp tang of sagebrush crushed under restless boots. Joshua Ryder Kane clapped Shade on the shoulder, a silent affirmation passing between them. Another ghost pulled back into the fold, his arrival knitting the frayed edges of their brotherhood tighter. Inside the house, Lily's laughter floated out, a rare melody as she played with the crayons Nathan Doc Ellis had unpacked. Her small world, momentarily shielded by the wall of leather-clad guardians. Hawk turned to the group, his voice cutting through the morning haze like a blade through fog. "Sheriff's on the fence. Could be our edge, or a trap. We move careful. Shade and Ghost. Scout those Badlands outposts from the map. Eyes only, no engagement." Andrew, Ghost. Riley nodded, slinging his pack with the efficiency of a man who'd navigated smoke-filled infernos, while Shade revved his bike softly, the engine's purr a vow of stealth. They rolled out in tandem, tires whispering over gravel as they vanished into the shimmering heat, leaving a trail of dust that curled like question marks toward the horizon. Back at the fire pit, Samuel Forge Bennett stoked the embers, his massive frame casting a protective arc over Emma as she emerged from the house, a pot of weak coffee in hand. "For the watch," she said quietly, her eyes meeting Hawk's with a gratitude that spoke volumes. Silent thanks for turning her crumbling home into a bastion. The morning stretched into a tense vigil, the riders rotating shifts with the precision of old war routines. Doc tended to minor aches from the night's discomfort, his gentle probes revealing not just physical strains, but the deeper toll. Joshua rubbing an old knee wound from a chopper crash years back, Forge admitting to sleepless nights haunted by desert memories. "This ain't just about Caleb," Doc murmured during a quiet moment, wrapping a fresh compress around Joshua's leg. "It's the chain, break one link, and the whole mess unravels for folks like Emma." His words hung in the air, heavy with the moral clarity that had drawn him from sterile hospital shifts to this dusty fray. Emma overheard, pausing with her coffee tin, the steam rising like exhaled doubts. "Caleb always said good men stand together. Never thought it'd be like this." Her voice cracked slightly, but there was steel beneath, forged in the fire of watching her world fracture. By midday, the heat pressed down like an invisible weight, mirages dancing on the road as distant engines announced new arrivals. Not threats, but echoes of the call. A dusty van pulled up, driven by a wiry woman named Grace, her face lined from years behind a diner counter in town. She'd heard whispers from Thomas the neighbor, her own brother once squeezed by Lang's loans, until the Iron Oath's shadow reached even her quiet life. "Brought supplies," she said, unloading crates of water and sandwiches, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. "And stories. Folks in town are talking. Lang's got a meeting tonight at the mill boasting about cleaning house." The revelation sparked a ripple through the group, eyes turning to Hawk as he absorbed it, the map unrolling once more under the porch shade. It was a thread pulling tighter, the corruption's heart exposed in the light of shared testimonies. Hawk felt the pull of the oath deepen, a reminder of promises whispered in foxholes. Protect the line, no matter how far it stretched. He'd lost too much to indifference before. A squad mate vanished in the chaos of a botched extraction, debts to faceless powers claiming another soul. But here, with Lily darting between legs to hand out sandwiches, her chalk-streaked smile a beacon, the past's shadows receded. "We don't crash the party," he decided, voice low and measured. "Ryder, you and Forge head into town, talk to Grace's contacts, gather names, build the case, make it voices, not fists." Joshua nodded, mounting up with Forge, their bikes coughing to life in a duet of restrained power, exhaust trailing like resolve into the afternoon glare. Emma watched them go, clutching Lily close, the child's bear tucked under her arm like a talisman. As the sun arced toward evening, painting the sky in fiery strokes, Shade and Ghost returned, faces grim under dust masks. They dismounted in the lengthening shadows, the air cooling with the promise of night. "Outposts are real," Shade reported, spreading a hand-drawn sketch on the hood of a bike. Chain-link hells, guards patrolling with dogs, saw a work crew, worn folks hauling crates under floodlights. No chains, but the kind that bind souls. Ghost added details, his voice steady. One man matched Caleb's description from the photo. Tall, scarred hands, directing but hollow-eyed. They're breaking them slow, turning debts into endless shifts. The words landed like stones in a still pond, stirring outrage tempered by strategy. No charges yet, but the evidence mounted. Immoral arsenal against Lang's empire. Emma's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled, hope flickering amid the grief. "He's alive?" Lily looked up, confusion etching her brow, but Hawk knelt swiftly, drawing her into a gentle hug, the scent of her hair, faint soap and earth, a grounding force. "We're closer, kid. That's how promises work, one step at a time." The group gathered closer, the fire pit reigniting with fresh wood, flames dancing like allies in the dusk. Doc passed around the coffee, now laced with a splash from a hidden flask, the warmth spreading through chests as stories flowed. Grace recounting her brother's narrow escape, Shade sharing a tale of a midnight repair that saved a stranded family years ago. It was the essence of their chosen kin. Bonds woven from scars and silences, stronger than any bloodline. Twilight deepened, stars emerging like watchful eyes as the first reports trickled in from town. Joshua and Forge radioed back, a dozen locals ready to speak, affidavits scribbled on napkins, painting Lang's web in stark relief. Mill layoffs engineered to create debtors, vanishings covered as relocations. The sheriff's office stirred too. Lena Hart's cruiser circled the outskirts, a tentative signal of shifting winds. Hawk stood alone for a moment, gazing at the house where light spilled from the windows, Lily's silhouette waving goodnight. The ride had evolved from protection to pursuit, a quest for justice that tested every fiber of honor. Doubts whispered, could they dismantle the rot without mirroring it? But the brothers' presence drowned them out, a chorus of unyielding loyalty. As full night cloaked the land, the yard pulsed with quiet preparation, bikes oiled, maps annotated, voices murmuring plans for the morrow's push toward the mill. Emma joined Hawk by the fire, her presence a quiet anchor. "Thank you for seeing what others miss." He nodded, the dog tags shifting under his shirt, cool reminders of oaths that had survived worse darkness. In this fragile haven, amid the scent of wood smoke and distant rain, redemption took root. Not in thunderous clashes, but in the steady flame of standing firm. The horizon loomed with the mill's shadow, a reckoning brewing. But the Iron Oath rode as one, their path illuminated by a child's plea and the unbreakable thread of promises kept. The moon hung full and unforgiving over the scrubland, its silver glow bathing the yard in an ethereal wash that turned the Iron Oath's bikes into spectral guardians, chrome edges catching light like drawn blades. Ethan, Hawk, Harlan sat on the porch steps, the rough wood biting into his palms as he traced the creases of the annotated map, the paper crinkling softly under his touch. The air had cooled to a crisp bite, carrying the faint, acrid whisper of distant wildfires, mingling with the wood smoke from the fire pit, where embers glowed like dying stars. Joshua Ryder Kane returned from his town run, dismounting with a weary grace, his vest dusted with the grit of backroads and hushed conversations. Forge lumbered over, handing him a tin mug of coffee laced with the night's chill, the steam curling upward in lazy spirals. "Voices are rising," Ryder said, his voice a low gravel honed by hours of persuasion in dimly lit diners and shadowed alleys. He sank beside Hawk, the step groaning under his weight. Grace rounded up 8 more, mill workers with tales of Caleb's last shift, how Lang's men cornered him in the break room, papers shoved under his nose like a noose, no signatures clean, all coercion, whispers of harm to families if they balked. The words settled heavy, painting invisible strokes of the corruption's reach, a web spun from layoffs and lies, ensnaring the desperate in threads of false hope. Hawk nodded, the map's lines blurring slightly in his vision, memories surfacing unbidden, a war-torn village where similar shadows had claimed a friend's kin, debts paid in silence that echoed for years. He'd vowed then to cut such chains, but life had scattered the oath like ash on the wind. Now, with Lily's chalked plea reborn in these gathered testimonies, the fire reignited, pulling him from solitary miles. Inside the house, the soft murmur of voices drifted out, Emma speaking in soothing tones to Lily, who clutched her bear tighter as bedtime stories wove tales of brave riders chasing away storms. Nathan Doc Ellis lingered in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the warm spill of lamplight, a fresh compress in hand for Emma's lingering aches. "She's holding," he reported quietly, joining the porch circle, his nurse's eyes scanning faces for unseen fractures. But the quarry photo, it's stirring ghosts for her. Caleb's alive but changed. Those outposts grind souls slow. Doc's hands, scarred from hasty sutures in flickering tents, clenched briefly, betraying the personal stake. A cousin lost to urban debts years back, vanished into the system's maw. The iron oath's bond pulsed here, in these shared silences, a chosen family mending not just flesh, but the frayed edges of trust. Andrew Ghost, Riley and Tyler Shade Monroe returned from their Badlands scout as the clock edged past 1, their bikes gliding in like phantoms, engines cut to whispers to avoid alerting prying ears. They gathered around the map under the porch bulb's hazy glow, dust shaking from their jackets like shedskins. "Guards are sloppy at the eastern camp," Shade murmured, his lean frame taut from hours crouched in scrub, the scent of parched earth still clinging to him. Saw Caleb, directing a crew under those floodlights, face gaunt but eyes sharp. He slipped a note to a worker. "We intercepted it on the wind. Says, 'Tell Emma hold the line coming home.'" Ghost nodded, his lanky arms folding as he added, "Dogs on chains, but the real locks are the ledgers. Names crossed out for defaults. Folks work till they break or bolt." The revelation hung electric, a spark of hope amid the moral mire, but Hawk felt the ethical snare tighten. Rescue Caleb meant piercing the outposts, risking the innocents within, turning protectors into intruders in a system rotten to the core. Emma emerged then, drawn by the hush, her shawl slipping as she clutched the note Shade handed over, her fingers trembling on the faded ink. He knew. Even there, he remembered us. Tears traced clean paths down her cheeks, illuminated by the bulb's flicker, and Lily peeked from behind her skirt, eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. The child toddled forward, pressing a new drawing into Hawk's hand, a family on bikes, whole and riding free. "For Daddy," she whispered, the simple act piercing deeper than any blade, reminding Hawk of the stakes, not just one man, but the ripple of redemption for all caught in Lang's grasp. He folded the paper carefully, tucking it beside his dog tags, the metal warming against his chest like a heartbeat renewed. As the group dispersed to final watches, Sheriff Lena Hart's cruiser appeared again at the road's edge, headlights dimmed to courtesy. She approached on foot this time, boots crunching gravel with deliberate slowness, her uniform rumpled from a night of internal wars. "Pulled what I could," she said, voice laced with the twang of reluctant alliance, handing over a slim folder under the moon's impartial gaze. "Lang's meeting at the mill tomorrow dusk. Council cronies, sealing deals on those rehab sites. Got recordings from a deputy who flipped, enough to bury him if we play it right." Her eyes met Hawke's, weary but resolute, the badge of fragile shield against the corruption she'd enabled too long. "But he's got muscle. Ex-cons on payroll, itching for a reason. You ride in loud, it ends bloody. Let me front. Your crew backs from the shadows." It was a pivot, her own redemption offered on the altar of conscience, born from seeing Lily's face in too many case files of the lost. Hawke weighed her words, the air thick with the scent of impending rain, thunder rumbling faint in the distance like a gathering storm. Trusting a badge meant gambling the oath's purity. Hadn't uniforms failed them before, in war zones where orders trumped honor? Yet her gaze held no deception, only the echo of personal losses, a brother squeezed by similar debts, gone quiet years ago. "We stand together," he decided, voice steady as the horizon. "No lone wolves. The voices from town join us. Make it a reckoning of truth, not force." Lena nodded, a ghost of relief softening her features as she retreated to her cruiser, taillights piercing the dark like hesitant beacons. The night deepened, the yard alive with subdued motion. Forge reinforcing barricades with scavenged timber, the hammer's thud, a rhythmic vow, rider coordinating radio checks, static crackling like whispers of strategy. Doc sat with Emma inside, mapping escape routes for the outposts, his calm voice a lifeline in her storm. Lily slept now, her breaths even, the house a sanctuary held by invisible threads of loyalty. Hawke stood alone at the fence, wind tugging at his vest, the map's weight in his pocket a compass toward dawn. Doubts clawed. Could they dismantle Lang without fracturing their own code, becoming the enforcers they despised? But the brothers' presence, scattered yet unbreakable, drowned the shadows, shade sharpening tools by firelight, ghost murmuring prayers from old rituals, each scar a testament to promises endured. Pre-dawn light crept in, gilding the edges of the world, as the first raindrops pattered like hesitant applause. The iron oath stirred, engines primed for the push to the mill, hearts aligned in the quiet thunder of purpose. Caleb's note burned in Hawke's mind, a fragile flame against the encroaching grey. Justice here demanded not vengeance, but the unyielding light of honor, weaving redemption from the frayed bonds of a broken town. The road ahead twisted with peril, but they rode as one, guardians forged in dust and determination, toward a dawn that promised not just rescue, but the restoration of what corruption had stolen. The rain fell in earnest now, a silver veil blurring the horizon as the Iron Oath convoy crested the rise toward the old mill, its skeletal silos piercing the storm like forgotten monuments to broken dreams. Ethan Hawke, Harlan led the pack, his Harley slicing through the downpour, water sheeting off his leathers in rivulets that stung like cold fire. The air thrummed with the low symphony of engines, 34 strong, headlights cutting foggy paths through the dusk, the scent of wet asphalt and ozone sharp in their nostrils. Behind him, Joshua Ryder Kane flanked on one side, his chopper steady despite the slick roads, while Samuel Forge Bennett anchored the rear, his massive frame a bulwark against the gathering gale. No roars of aggression, just the purposeful hum of unity. A chosen family riding into the heart of corruption, bound by oaths whispered in wars, long faded. Sheriff Lena Hart's cruiser led the way, its blue lights muted to avoid alarm, a tentative alliance forged in the pre-dawn hours. She'd fronted the plan. A routine inspection to draw Lang out, backed by the voices from town, affidavits clutched in her folder like ammunition of truth. Emma and Lily waited at the house under Doc's watchful eye, the child's drawing tucked in Hawk's vest, a talisman against the moral storm ahead. Hawk's grip tightened on the handlebars, rain blurring his vision but not his resolve. Caleb's note burned in his pocket, a fragile vow pulling him forward. He'd seen too many vanish into shadows like this, debts devouring lives, systems grinding the innocent to dust. Tonight, the oath demanded exposure, not erasure, justice carved from light rather than blood. The mill loomed, a hulking beast of rusted iron and weathered brick, floodlights casting harsh pools amid the rain-swept yard. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their ponchos slick and figures blurred, but the iron oath dismounted in shadows, boots silent on the muddied gravel. Lena approached the gate alone, her voice amplified by a bullhorn cutting through the downpour. "Victor Lang, this is Sheriff Hart. Open up. We've got questions on those rehab sites." The response was a flicker of movement inside, doors creaking open as Lang emerged, flanked by his enforcers, his suit sodden but posture defiant, eyes narrowing at the cruiser. "Hart, you finally growing a spine? This is business, private." His voice carried oily confidence laced with the twang of untouchable power, but it faltered as the riders stepped into the light, a wall of leather and unyielding stairs. Hawk moved forward with rider and shade, the rain drumming on their helmets like urgent heartbeats. "Business ends when it preys on families," Hawk said, his tone even, the dog tags glinting wet under his collar. Lang's gaze flicked over them, calculating, but Lena held up the folder, rain spotting the pages. Recordings, witness statements, your loans, the outposts, Caleb Harlan's relocation. "It's over. Step down clean, or the feds get the full reel." The air thickened, charged with the storm's fury and the weight of unraveling lies. Enforcers shifted, hands hovering near concealed holsters, but Forge's presence loomed nearby, a silent mountain, while Ghost and the others formed an unbreakable ring. No weapons drawn, just the quiet thunder of loyalty that needed no force. Inside the mill's echoing hall, under dripping rafters that wept like confessions, Lang's facade cracked. The group pushed in, Lena leading with badge held high, the riders fanning out to secure the space without a single raised voice. Ledgers lay open on a scarred desk, columns of names and sums exposed like wounds, Caleb's entry circled in red ink. "You think bikers scare me?" Lang snarled, but his eyes darted to the window where townfolk, Grace, Thomas, and a dozen more, gathered under umbrellas, their murmurs a rising tide of accusation. Hawk knelt by a side door, spotting movement in the holding area. Workers huddled in the gloom, faces gaunt from endless shifts, and there, Caleb, unchained but hollowed, directing a final crate before the chaos reached him. Caleb. Emma's voice. No, wait, it was Hawk calling out, but the word carried her echo from memory. The man turned, recognition dawning through the rain-streaked glass, his scarred hands pausing mid-lift. No dramatic rush. Instead, the workers rose as one, emboldened by the intruder's calm authority, handing over keys and whispers of hidden paths. Lang backed against the wall, enforcers melting into the shadows as Lena cuffed him, the click of metal a punctuation to his empire's fall. "This town's done with your chains," she said, voice steady despite the tremor of her own redemption. Outside, the rain eased to a patter, the crowd's voices swelling into a chorus of release, affidavits passed hand to hand, stories spilling like the storm's aftermath. Caleb emerged into the yard, supported by Shade and Ghost, his steps faltering but eyes lighting on the convoy with a spark of home. Hawk clasped his shoulder, the rain washing away years of grit in a single, wordless nod. The oath fulfilled, A brother's debt paid not in vengeance, but in unbreaking presence. The riders formed an honor guard as Caleb mounted a spare bike. The engines rumble a welcome roar, blending with the fading thunder. Back at the house, as dawn broke through clearing skies, Emma rushed into his arms, Lily burying her face in his chest, the family whole under the porch's shelter. Doc tended minor wounds with quiet efficiency, while the group lingered, sharing coffee from dented mugs, the steam rising like exhaled relief. Hawk stood apart, watching the reunion, the weight of his scars lighter now, the solitary miles traded for this forged kinship. The iron oath had scattered once, ghosts chasing personal demons, but a child's plea and a father's vanishing had called them home, reminding them that promises outlived the chaos, loyalty the true armor against corruption's chill. Lang's web unraveled in the light of truth, the mill's shadows yielding to justice's dawn, not through fists, but the power of standing firm. As the sun crested, gilding the wet earth in gold, the riders mounted up one last time, engines harmonizing in farewell. Hawk lingered, Lily's drawing now pinned to his tank, a family on the road, free and fierce. The convoy rolled out, dust and rain mixing into muddied paths of renewal, leaving behind a town breathing easier, bonds mended by quiet courage. Hawk throttled forward, the wind drying his leathers, the horizon no longer empty, but alive with the echo of oaths kept. Redemption wasn't a destination, but the ride itself. Family chosen, honor unbroken, legacies carved in the roar of engines and the whisper of promises fulfilled. If these tales of unbreakable loyalty and moral fire have stirred your soul, subscribe for more stories of quiet heroes and the bonds that endure. Your support keeps the light shining on paths worth riding.